Welcome, my friends, to change. Change, so spooky, so changingly sad. I had something good going, and now I'm just going mad. But something good must come from something bad. And if it's only ever good as it is now, then how can it grow? How can we know some other kind of magic? So, change. Change is the nature of the universe. So, there's only one thing that doesn't change. Or was it, there's only one, change is the only constant, that thing. Except, I think, even the speed of light apparently changes, and they edit it a little bit. They're like, oh, that doesn't make sense with our theories, would change. According to Rupert Sheldrake, I think. Dr. Rupert Sheldrake. But one constant, apart from change, I think is stillness, or the emptiness of existence, the presence of the invisible, empty womb of creation, which happens to be consciousness, it seems. Like you and, okay, we won't get too deep, but consciousness seems to be basically just the field in which everything happens, this feeling, sensing field of love. And then, but there are movements within that, and that's all change. And so, that's the whole thing, like impermanence, nothing stays apart from the presence of like, oh, that awareness in which everything happens, your whole life unfolding in the space of your awareness, even your head, like in your head, your head is an object inside your awareness. You can imagine in front of it, in the middle of it, behind it. What are you behind your head? Are you in your head? No, your head is in your field of awareness. Think about that. Wrap your head around that what your head is wrapped around, or what is wrapped around your head. Anyway, so, but everything basically, your body is changing, like, and, your emotions, your mind, circumstances, and that can be pretty difficult. Change, yeah, we resist change a lot. But yes, I'm just going to talk about change a little bit and maybe shed some light, hopefully ease some suffering in my good comrades of the earth here. So, okay, well, I mean, yeah, we want change when things are getting better, but we don't want change when things get worse. But it's like you can't have one without the other, 'Cause, for you, something, oh, great, there's a job opening, wonderful. Well, for someone else, they just got fired. So, and if you were trading places, you'd be like, no, how terrible. But if you zoom out and like you're an impartial observer, you'd be like, well, it's just change, it's good and bad. And I think basically change, even though yeah, change is necessary. Otherwise, you couldn't have a dynamic, growing, changing, developing system. Um, so in order, there's many friends so I lived in Australia, had many amazing friends. Then I moved to Canada, and I, had less time and connection with my Australian friends, which in a way is very difficult, and I still miss them. Um, but then that opened up these new friendships and connections, which I wouldn't have had otherwise in Canada. And so, that change was required, to open up. I wouldn't have had those connections otherwise. And then I left them behind to move to Ireland, and so, and now I've met, amazing new people here. And so those connections would be impossible if I was like, okay, that's enough change. Let's stick with Canada. Um, and so there's this poem, Stages by Herman Hesse. I would highly recommend everyone read. Really cool. It's from some, I think it's within a novel. Here's but yeah. The Glass Bead Game. I haven't read, but anyway, there's the context. But it's a really amazing poem. Shout out to Marliese, putting it in a book for me. Uh, um, she's probably not listening for various reasons, but put it in like this gift she gave me ages ago. Um, and yeah, it's pretty powerful, good stuff. But part of the thing there is like, it's like, so something like, so we must prepare for, farewell and leave taking. So be it, heart, bid farewell without end. And kind of saying like, in beginnings dwells a magic force, to lift us up and guide us. And kind of saying that all, what is it like, uh, what's it, something, oh yeah, the cosmic spirit seeks not to detain us, but stage by stage to lift us up to wider spaces, and life shall may summon us to newer races, something like that. But and yeah, I think change is inevitable, so why resist it? I think in general, only try to control things which you can control, or you have a hope of controlling. Um, if I'm like, okay, going to try and move the moon with my mind, like, why isn't it working? Like, or, I'm going to try and lift this thing, some insanely heavy object. It's like, what's the point of this? You know you can't do it. And then you're going to suffer, have this emotional turmoil. But we do that all the time with things like, oh, this person doesn't like me, but I need them to like me. Or, oh, I'm running late. God, how, or this technology isn't working, and getting frustrated. But it's like, well, this is out of my control. Why am I resisting it, right? And if you just save your energy for things that you can control, you'll realize, oh my God, there's all these things that I can control, but half the time I'm not noticing them, and I'm definitely not like trying to control them, putting in my energy, even though I could do it if I was paying attention and I just put in the energy. I'm missing these opportunities because I'm too tired from resisting things that are out of my control. Um, and one such thing is change, that things change. And so, say, I can see my face, I'm getting older, but I'm always like, okay, cool, let's just go with it, roll with it. And so then I think that keeps you younger anyway, if you just go with the flow, but, and, have good vibes. But, you know, that's sometimes it's like, oh yeah, okay, that's be nice, just like, look like young and stuff, maybe, forever. But it's like, and then you go, oh, where's this going to lead? I'm going to be like looking older. Will I look okay? Um, and so, that can be difficult. Or say your body, like my eyes recently, like there's been haven't been the best because I think did a lot of writing, and then it had a bit of an impact on my eyes from the staring at a computer so much. And then just in general, maybe, being a bit busy or not sleeping enough, I think. And so that's kind of like, oh no. But then, I was just thinking like, just, it is what it is, I'll just do the best I can, but just go with the flow. And I was just looking out of I was on like the tram or whatever, just looking out. And then as soon as I accept that, my vision feels a bit better anyway. But there's because I'm relaxed. But there's a certain peace and grace to that of just, you know, just going with the flow. And I think often it actually makes things better. But even if it didn't, just it's still wise because you're not wasting your energy, and you kind of, it's a certain moral high ground in that, going like, okay, life, so be it. Sip of tea. Tea time, everyone. Cottage scale. Time for tea. So yeah, okay. But yeah, change, like uh our body is constantly, cells are constantly dying and being reborn. And I think that's like in your mouth heals the fastest, I think. So if you cut yourself in your mouth, or you bite your lip or something, you bite your tongue, that heals like so fast, like within a day or something, it's healed. Um, but then your bones, I think they take the longest to regenerate, replace their cells. Um, but so I think that's like 10 years or something. But your body, let's say 10 years ago, or 12 years ago, 11 years ago, not a single cell in your body is still present in you right now. They're all totally replaced. So me, let's say when I was 20 years old, okay, I was traveling Europe. Well, I'm like 32 now, so all those cells have been replaced. Um, and so that body is totally gone. I wasn't, there's a new body, but it's like that thing, Jason's ship or whatever. It's like if you replace a ship, plank by plank, eventually it's a totally different ship, but is it the same ship? Or is it was it Euphues's ship or something? Don't know. I'm not cultured enough, but uh, yeah. And so okay, or like say a country, Germany today is it the same as Germany 200 years ago? A lot of the people have been, have changed. There's no one alive who was alive then, right? And a lot of the cultures changed and this and that, buildings, ways of life. But there's still a legacy. So you could say in a way it's still the same thing, but in another way it's different. Um, but kind of in the way that people live on through their children, you could say the family lineage is there. Um, but yeah, and so so that's your body, right? It's totally replaced. But then you think about your emotions and your mind. Say the way you feel and the way you think changes a lot. It can change moment to moment, but even the general patterns of how you think and behave change quite radically. Like me, I used to be heavily like socialist. I thought, oh yeah, socialist capitalism is the way. Like, oh what a shame people don't understand. Like you need, high level of taxation and like the government, to take from the really rich and kind of balance things out. And then actually, it turns out, from what I understand now, as far as I can tell, now I have the humility to say that I'm not totally sure. Like, maybe I'll learn something more in the future and change my perspective again. But as far as I can tell, um, uh, free market capitalism is the way. And I had a limited perspective, and it was a narrative which was cohesive, but there was a bunch of certain contradictions I hadn't noticed, and it was also contradicted by other information which I hadn't included in that model. So now I have a more detailed map, and so it includes things which would contradict the theory of socialist capitalism. Anyway, that's just one part of my perspective of what's right in the world, and that has changed, and it's a pretty significant change, and all kinds of stuff, like you know, things about like tradition or um, just yeah, my view of what is real and what is and what should be, and so that can change, year to year, or even month to month. It's changing because it doesn't happen on one day usually. Sometimes big things change suddenly, but usually it's a gradual thing. So kind of thought to thought, with every thought I'm dead and born. The heir to my fortune knows not the morn, nor yet will he at the next thought's horn see final night. So why tend the corn? Blah blah blah. Says my 16-year-old self. But so yeah, and then basically what you're left with is, so in life things change, right? And then I think we should try to focus on, controlling and influencing what we can control and influence, and having the grace and the practical wisdom to just not try to resist, even if it's really difficult, like, oh, I really love this thing, I've really appreciated this, and it's leaving, it's like it can be a beautiful thing, I guess, to like, and just like a meaningful thing to feel that emotion and not to try to wish that away either, but to honor that emotion and honor that, situation and that change, and even just to feel the loss of that. But I think it should be felt with a kind of underlying peace of an understanding that this is right. What's in a weird, poignant way, you know. Um, but then so that's about life, like circumstances, external and, but then also internal, like the very self, you know, our own self is constantly changing. Like who am I now? And that's what freaked me out when I was a teenager. I was like, oh my God, wait, is the self an illusion? What the hell? Like, um, and then and then I came to the conclusion that either the soul exists or else the self is an illusion, because everything's constantly changing. Um, it's not continuous, you're a different person. And basically, I think that's fair enough. That reasoning, I think it's valid. But then it turns out, through meditation and maybe some psychedelic medicines, um, and just kind of reading and reflecting and growing and learning, um, it turns out that, you know, you can experience directly the soul, spirit, or consciousness, you know, and it's nothing mysterious. It's the most natural thing in the world. It is literally who you are, who I am. And you could basically say, if you want to know what it is, I can't put it into words because it's not words. It's deeper and more important than words. It's the one thing which you can't put into words, I guess, because it is the viewer of words. You know, it is basically it is what exists when you stop thinking or when you exit your mind. So it's not like you're falling asleep. It's actually you're becoming more awake. You're kind of coming full circle. You know, you can be thoughtless and asleep, and you can come up to being thinking, but then I guess it's like a spiral. Like the highest point is yeah, you're able to turn off thought and just be present and be aware. Um, or something. um, but yeah, so that yeah, ultimately I think that does exist, and so that's the good news. You know, all this stuff's changing, and it might be it freaked me out. Like, oh my God, oh, it was a bit disorienting to think like, oh, why should I plan for anything if it's all an illusion? But then I think it turns out that, oh, good news, everyone, we're immortal and we exist, and you know, the soul and the self is real, but it's just not the self we often think is us, in my humble opinion. Um, but yeah, so, and that's a beautiful change to kind of self. And speaking of change, I think that's kind of a change in a shift in selfhood, which is happening to many people around the planet at this point. Um, and it's basically the key to our survival as a species. I think the old way of being, where it's excluding others and it's based upon your stories and your narratives, um, when two narratives, you know, confront each other, you see what happens in Ukraine or in Gaza or, you know, and in many places, you know, and um, it's this truth on both sides, but the inability to just step outside of your narrative and just kind of examine other details and maybe, you know, see if there's any truth in the other person's point of view. Um, that, you know, is basically prevents peace. And we're getting so powerful now that, you know, if we don't have peace, we may just obliterate all of us. Um, so I think that would not be a good change. That's not the change we want. Um, but then, you know, being able to kind of connect to the soul, not to bring everything back to the soul, but basically that's where it's going anyway. That's where it's coming from. That is the key to, so inner peace comes from the soul, you know, it comes from stepping outside of thinking. Um, you know, I'm always talking about the power of now, Eckhart Tolle, but, you know, for good reason. I think um, everyone should read that. Well, everyone who's interested in inner peace and sanity and being as awake and aware as you can be, as you know, wisdom. Um, so yeah, so that would be the internal thing. That's a change. There's constant change, but there is something constant that is not changing within us, and that is actually our deepest self. All that changes, I think Ramana Maharshi, is that his name, said, nothing that changes is real. And then I think, was it Muji or someone said, nothing that changes is you. Uh, you know, so that's interesting. So what's there to worry about? Everything changing? Like, oh, I mean, even in an extreme situation, if you're being tortured, you know, your best hope is just going, hey, this is all like a sort of dream and it feels extremely real, but I am the universe, I am pure consciousness, and um, this is an extremely realistic virtual reality program, you know. And to understand that all these changes, these pain receptors in my body, they're chemicals, you know, they're, bioelectric kind of like, systems programmed for survival and feedback and, thriving in an ecosystem, but that you can change that narrative and, that's one way of looking at it, instead of just, oh, it's pain and it's bad. Um, and that can help you, I think, with I've done that with small pain. Torture is obviously a very much difficult thing, but I think in theory it would work if you could be awake enough. But Yeah. So, but yeah, so change and the self. All right. Anything else? So going a bit deep there, but you know, that's the way it is. Another sip of tea, then we'll bring this to a conclusion. Yeah, I guess just that in life, there is creation, there is preservation, and there is destruction. These are the things we can do. And I guess naturally life is creating things, and it is destroying things. And I guess preservation or decay are kind of the forces of creation and the forces of destruction, shifting their ratios in a way, or like, which one maintains. Because to preserve, I guess, requires creative will, to preserve your traditions, like say the tradition of freedom in our culture, which I love very deeply, and our culture the West gets a lot of flack, and fair enough. There's a lot of imperfections in the West. There's imperfections everywhere, like name a country which is not perfect, you know, sorry, which is perfect, you know. And one beautiful thing about the West is this tradition of freedom. Even if, okay, there've been like empires and all these shenanigans, and in Ireland, obviously my ancestors caught the the sharp end of the stick there, Um, but uh, nonetheless, freedom is something which is, these in the liberal democracies of the world came from the West, that's the tradition, and they remain the freest places, um, even now, even at such a state of decay as they're currently at, um, which is a difficult change to bear. But yeah, so preserving, I'm very keen to preserve this culture of freedom, and that requires, I think, people writing letters, thinking, becoming more aware, meditating, being healthy, just kind of trying to preserve sanity and clear thinking and good heart in yourself, and then kind of communicating that with others, writing letters, helping people, or like emails or whatever, to the government. Hey, here's a thing. I think it's a bad idea, or here I think there's a good idea. We should do this. Um, or just connecting with other people, reading books and educating yourself, and um, all these things, trying to build things, just using your creative energy to sustain what's good, because naturally it'll decay, both from just entropy and chaos, things falling apart. Try to stand on one foot for an hour. Your muscles start depleting their energy supplies, the pressures start building up, things, forces mount in reaction to forces. And so entropy, these feedback systems can kind of bring an end to things. Like, what's it, hard, hard times make strong men make easy times make soft men make hard times. Unfortunately, you might be like, that's so patriarchal and sexist. Yeah, I don't know. I think there feels like there's a bit of truth to that, Um, and I guess it will work for women too, but I think especially the masculine has a very big role with that. Especially given there's going to be a minority of, there's always going to be predatory men somewhere within or without a community, and so you need men who are capable of violence, but they've got it under the dominion of love. So it's guided by love and goodness. You need strong men to fight off. It's like other. It happens ever in the animal kingdom too, but like I think with humans, you still have that. Like the women can have the masculine, but in general, it's more in men. So okay, here am I defending myself with. This is a change. That comment you probably maybe 10 years ago, I would have been able to say that without feeling like I needed to justify using the word man in that traditional sense there, for a traditional male role. But hey, these are changes in the culture, or changes in myself. But anyway, yeah. So, point being, there are things worth, yeah, so naturally there's chaos and entropy pulling things down, and there's also bad people, or, misguided people. Maybe they think they're doing good things for everyone, but they're actually causing problems. Or they know they're hurting us, but they think they're doing good things for themselves and their family, and so they're like, yeah, it's fine, whatever. Dictators, etc., tyrants. Um, but yeah, so there are these forces of creation and destruction, And you can create good things and you can create bad things, and you can destroy good things and you can destroy bad things. And this is all change. And I think it's good to create and to destroy the best things. Well, we're guided by your best awareness of what's right. And so, create the best things you can and destroy the worst things you can. So, you see within yourself some sort of habit that's not healthy. Okay, destroy it, uproot it, kill that. If I'm growing, one of the reasons why growing plants I think is so amazing, like growing food, it teaches you a lot. It's like I was all like, real like, oh, I've always loved nature. I was like, yeah, beautiful, plants and stuff. And then I was starting to grow these, vegetables, and I, quickly realized like, oh my God, all these weeds are taking over. And then realizing like, oh, they're gonna just drain the resources from my plants, and my plants are gonna die. And we're like, I can't just let them all live. Like my plants are going to get killed by these plants if I don't. So I have to defend them, And but then I'm like, but who's to say my plants are, have more of a right to be there than these other weeds? A weed is just something that we don't think is useful, but maybe my plants are weeds to them. They're like, hey, they're not useful to me. This freaking chili you're growing, but so then I was like, well, yeah, but this food I'm growing is going to nourish me with health, and then it's going to help me be a healthy person and to feel good, have good energy, and to think clearly, and then I can support other people, and we can make humanity more of a beautiful force, like a flower on the plant of Mother Earth, rather than like some sort of parasite. And we can uplift, write beautiful works like Shakespearean beauty with the cosmic input and influx of modern information. We can make the beautiful art and architecture, and explore wisdom. There's many beautiful relationship, empathy, drama. There's so many beautiful things we can do as humans. I was like, okay, yeah. So that me, I explained this to the weeds. I was like, this is why I'm doing it. And so it's like, yeah, fair enough. I have a right to be here. My plants have a right to be here. These weeds, they have a right to be here. But in a way, it's like, yeah, you know, in this case, it's like might is right, kind of like, well, it's not might is right, but it's just that I have the ability to, enforce this. Anyway, I'm explaining to you, whoever's listening, like the politics of my garden. Um, anyway, and so, I start pulling out the weeds, and then I got to, there's always often like a little feeling of like, oh yeah, sorry there, little plant. But then I also reflect like, oh yeah, I think it's all, that's just the one consciousness in everything. So that spirit, is coming through the plants, but that's me, and it's living elsewhere anyway. But in a way, it's just ending. It's almost like I imagine like, you're like game over. You have to, reincarnate as another player in the video game. Sometimes there'll be like these. You could be in like these war games where there'd be two teams against each other, but there's like a time limit and you're getting points. And if you get killed, it's like game over. But then you can kind of respawn as another character. It's almost like the spirit is constantly respawning as other characters. Like, oh, okay, that weed got taken. All right, where else am I now? You know. But anyway, so I what's the point? So yeah, that being aware of that process, helped me kind of realize, oh yeah, okay, there's a place for destruction, and that it's not a bad thing. That's part of nature too. And so I'm destroying these other plants, but that's required for the creation of my garden, and the creation of my health and all these things I'm developing. Um, and so that was pretty profound. But I think, or destroying, yeah, bad habits in yourself, destroying, say if there's a culture of like, oh yeah, if women aren't accompanied, it's okay to go and, kind of like um, harass them, or worse, Apparently that's a culture in parts of the world. And I think, yeah, that's not okay. You can't do that. That's crazy. So that should be destroyed. And not the people, but the culture. That way of doing things is not healthy. It's like women have the right to walk around on their own just as much as men, don't they? You know? Or, if it's like the idea that like, oh, human beings should be destroyed. We're a parasite. It's like, well, that's a rather naive, immature perspective, I would say, because it doesn't take into account the fact that we are nature, and we are nature on Earth. Seemingly, as far as we know, we're nature's most, intelligent, kind kind of creation, and nature can experience herself through us. And so I think if you look at the wisest, most peaceful, most eloquent, healthiest people, who don't tend to be the political leaders or even the leaders, cultural leaders in many cases, um, they don't think of humans as some sort of parasite, quite the reverse. And ironically, the people who call humans parasites are the parasites, in a way. It's like that, you know, well, there's parasitic tendencies in all of us. But I'd say that's not a healthy perspective. The extinctionist movement, or whatever, this guy, is in the New York Times, like, you know, there are how many, 8 billion humans, but it'd be better if there were zero. And he's asked, wants a voluntary, suicide of the species. It's like insane. So that I think is, rather than destroy the species and all the potential for beauty and music and all this stuff that we can do, can monkeys make Bach? You know, uh, the cello suites. Listen to that and tell me humans are a parasite only. Come on, get a grip. Um, and so I think that is that rather than destroying species, it would be better to destroy that point of view, that ideology. So there are things that should be destroyed, and we're going to disagree upon what should be created and what should be destroyed, and so what should be preserved or kind of um, yeah, torn down. But I think it should all just be we try to encourage each other, even when we disagree, encourage each other to be guided by our own, by truth and by um, a genuine attempt for the highest good. Um, and I think over time, if you're striving really genuinely for the good and not just, then you will start to notice that the highest good is not just my good, it's the good of the whole world. Um, and then if you start getting into that, you'll start to get thinking like, okay, well, what is really going on? What are the real problems so that we have the real solutions? And then that's where you'll come to a point where there's an invitation to let your narratives, you know, dissolve and be changed when they're no longer shown to make sense. Um, and so uh, I think we try to encourage, peacefully as many people as possible, to when we're making our changes in the world within ourselves and outside of ourselves, mostly to try to change ourselves. The world changes from within, right? So if I change myself, I become a wiser, more conscious, more peaceful person, healthier person. I will influence others by example. But he looks really healthy and happy. I might copy him. That looks nice. But then also the words and the actions and the responses, the emotions, the vibrations that come from me, and the creations, from me, they will be such as to uplift, the world. So anything you could change in the world will naturally come from you changing yourself, as a natural, result of that. That'll be the fruit of you tending your own garden. Um, so yeah, I told you the garden was relevant. Um, and let's see. Um, so yeah, I think as we're working on, change and, um, kind of enthusiastically finding the peace and the restfulness and the serenity and just the oblivion of the self. Just let yourself be, obliterated by reality. Just let it be. Take some breaths, or let the breaths be taken as they will on their own. Um, and then the energy will start to surge and rise, and you'll start to heal. And this motivation, this desire, will naturally rise, with this enthusiasm, this you know infinite energy and resourcefulness for creation, and you know being an agent of change, and not just being changed, but changing life. Being comfortable and open to changing the world, starting through your own self. Um, um, and yeah, with all of this, just to be guided by truth and love and harmony. Um, Ultimately, to be guided by the silence, the stillness of the true self, just letting your thoughts subside. Um, um, yeah, um, was it, 1,000 size, what is it, float to the ground. I can't remember that line maybe, or it'll come to me, but um, may all calculations come to rest in silent peace and gentleness. Remember that bit anyway. But yeah, and so all right, I hope that some interesting perspectives. I hope I have changed you for the better, and I've changed myself through this. And yes, one thing also I would say is, yeah, other people. Uh, it is right to want to change the world and other people, but through communication, but we need to respect that they ultimately live their lives, right? And so, they're the masters of their kingdom. And so if I'm the government, I want to change everyone. Yeah, hey, come on. They're living their own lives. If they're not hurting others, they're allowed to do whatever they want, whether it's healthy or not. Um, and you can change yourself. When you're in a relationship, it's a bit different because you've got a bond together. So there's a certain dance there, a certain promise. Like, okay, you can say, look, in order for me to live a happy life, these are some things that I need. And then, and some of them will require the other person to change. And that's reasonable. And then they will say, well, yeah, well, here's some things that I need from you, and you need to change. And that's reasonable. And I think the key is to go, okay, what things do we need each other to change? And what things do we want each other to change? And if it's like, well, um, basically, is it like about balance and harmony? When one of us is like out of line, or, we're out of alignment and it's not healthy, or maybe, it's okay, it's kind of healthy, it's kind of subjective. However, it's like the other person just can't live with that. It's too out of resonance with them. Either of those, then it's going to be like, okay, either you leave the relationship, or you go, okay, what do I want? Do I want the relationship, given that this is necessary for it? And just be honest with the communication and go, okay, if, what, basically there's going to be there's going to be, yeah, I guess 4 categories. It's like there's things where um, there's going to be things where like we're in sync and it's the same. We're on the same page and it's good for us, or we're different, but it's good for us. It's like interesting. It makes things good. But when we're the same in some way, or we're different in some way, and it's bad for us, um, then it needs to change. I guess if we're in the same, it's a codependency kind of thing. Like, oh, we both love taking heroin. It's like, oh, maybe we should stop that. Okay, just have a conversation and stop it. But when there's a difference, let's say, and it's like, no, you need to change. No, you need to change. Who should change? Well, I think we need to identify, okay, is it some things it's just going to be, that's just who you are, and you have a right to be like that. And if I, love you and I want to be in a relationship with you, then I just have to accept it, you know? And then the same thing, vice versa for me. Like certain things where, no, that's just who I am. And look, I can't change that. That's not going to happen. And you just have to, if you want to be with me, you have to accept that. There's those 2 things. And then there's also 2 things where it'd be like, oh, there's things where, this is how you are, but you need to sacrifice that for me because I need you to change. And vice versa. Things where you need me to change and I just have to sacrifice that. So I think we shouldn't be sacrificing our core self, but there are parts of us where it's just like, yeah, we want to do these things, but we don't really need to. It's not really that essential to us. So it's, figuring out, is it part of my core self, or is it just some habit I have, which I could or even should let go in order to, continue the dance of this relationship. And at the end of the day, it's all about, what do you want? Do you want the relationship? And if you do, then you make these sacrifices because you're getting what you want. You want that relationship. Um, and yeah, so that's a little bit also about change, I think. And or one more thing would just be kids, I guess. Like, I think wanting to guide your kids, the children, they don't, they need structure and boundaries. They've always had structure and boundaries for millions of years. So that's their, milieu, their evolutionary milieu. If you suddenly change that, it's going to throw things out of balance, homeostasis. Um, but you should be respectful and try to treat them as adults as soon as possible, and be kind and give them as much freedom as you can. but there is a certain boundary you have to set around them, I think, and say, okay, within this boundary, you're completely free. Around it, no, can't do that. I'm not going to let you. And that's actually how they thrive. There's a balance there. There's plenty of confusion and complexity and nuance and discovery and adventure within whatever little circle you can. Even if you're very strict, there's going to be so much like to explore within that. And ideally, you won't be crazy strict. You'll be like reasonable and balanced. So really, there's plenty to focus on there. So you're actually helping them because you're otherwise it's overwhelming the amount of freedom. And also you with children, your job, you're not just their friend. Your job is to prepare them for life and to give them good habits and right good healthy perspectives and behaviors basically. And so as they're growing, you give them these kind of fundamental things. It's like an apprenticeship thing. They're the Padawan, you're the master, and then and they maybe sometimes they won't like it, but you'll say, hey, no, you're doing this. I'm going to change you. You're not allowed to do that. That's not right. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm setting that boundary as best as I can, and that's my job. And I can't do better than I can. All I can do is my best. And maybe I'm not perfect, but hey, at least I'm trying, and I'm trying my best to be my best and to constantly grow and be aware. And then when you're an adult, when you're 18, all right, now you get to do whatever you want. But I've set, or whenever, you're mature enough that that's deemed, there's that passing of the torch. Um, but I think that is something where children really need that guidance and structure. And, if you don't, if when you're setting a boundary and going, hey, no, that's not healthy, I'm going to change you, or I'm going to say no, set a boundary. If you don't do it, lovingly and early when they have the flexibility and adaptability to change, then someone else will when they're an adult and it's hard to change, and they'll do it in a brutal way. They won't care. What are you to me? I'll just do it. So you get fired by your boss or you get dumped by your partner or whatever because, you're out of line. You're being, so parents, your job is to try to help the children, be balanced people. And so that also involves change, kind of enforcing change to some extent when there are things where, oh, you're not doing this, but you should, or you're doing this and you shouldn't, you know? So that'd be one final thing I'd say about change. Now, for a very shocking change, I am going to stop talking. So that's it. Much love, everyone.